Hello everyone! Thank you for joining me on this Friday morning. My name is Tamara and I work here at Grafton Lakes State Park as an environmental educator. So today we're going to be talking about the bizarre secret life of dragonflies. Many of you may see dragonflies in the summer and in the spring, and here I have the little stuffed animal that's going to help me explain about the secret life of dragonflies. And so with our stuffed animal, we can see that our dragonflies have two wings and they have this nice long tail. Now most people, when they think of dragonflies, they think of something that looks similar to this guy. Now if I was to ask an elementary age child to tell me about the life stages of a butterfly, most of them could tell me easily the 4 stages of a butterfly's life. And maybe some of them could even tell me that big M word, metamorphosis. But most people don't even know that dragonflies are not born with wings. In fact, dragonfly eggs are laid underwater. So in the very beginning of their life cycle, a dragonfly's mate actually by forming a heart. So if you ever see 2 dragonflies in the air and they're actually forming this, almost looks like a heart or what we call a mating wheel, then that is 2 dragonflies mating. And when they go to actually lay those eggs, they'll lay them inside the water. Now sometimes a mother dragonfly will lay them on lily pads, just in the water. Sometimes they continue being tandem, being attached to each other when they lay those eggs. But if they're really lucky, a dragonfly mother will lay its eggs inside a stem, inside the water. And these eggs are tiny, so tiny that they're half a millimeter at the longest. So teeny tiny eggs, and they'll lay dozens, even hundreds of eggs at one time. So they want to make sure they have the best chances, and after a while that little tiny dragonfly will hatch and live the majority of its lifetime underwater as a nymph. So dragonflies have 3 life stages. They have the egg, the nymph, and the full-grown adult dragonfly. We think about the butterflies, they have an egg, they have a nymph, which we call caterpillar, and then they have a chrysalis, and then they have the full-grown adult butterfly. When a dragonfly nymph breaks out of its egg, it's teeny tiny and almost unrecognizable. Like I said, baby dragonflies are not born with wings, but they are born with a bunch of crazy adaptations. First of all, they have gills. Obviously, in order to live underwater, they need gills. Those gills are located in their butts. In order to be able to breathe, they use those gills through their butts to breathe, and they have a couple different methods of getting their prey. And this all involves a lot of deception and a lot of sneaking up on their prey. And they have a special weapon called a labium. Now that labium is the lower part of their lip. And that lower part of their lip sits like this on their mouth. And when they want to catch prey, they have to breathe in, suck in a ton of water into their butt, and then to propel forward, they push that water out of their butt, send that detachable lower lip forward that has these pincers on it, and they bring their prey back to their mouth all in 1/100th of a second. These little dragonflies are such good predators that they not only eat things that are smaller than them, but they'll eat tadpoles and also small fish. So they're only about this big at their biggest size, but they are underwater dragons. And so they'll go through many molting stages in their life. They'll start out as a very small little nymph, and then in order to grow, they have an exoskeleton. So in order to grow, they actually have to shed that exoskeleton and then instantaneously grow bigger. And then a little while later, they'll shed that exoskeleton again and then instantaneously grow bigger again. And they'll do this 8 to 17 times throughout their time underwater. And their time underwater is dependent on their species, because some dragonflies only spend one season underwater, only about 6 months from the time that they're laid in midsummer to the time that they come out in spring of next year, all the way to 6 years underwater. So these guys can spend a long time underwater depending on their species. And underwater, they also have to deal with some predators, but in general, these guys are top dogs in their little ponds that they tend to hang out in. And when they decide that they have been underwater long enough, they will take the last stage of their life, crawling out of the water onto a reed. So if you ever find a pond, look at the reeds around the pond. Those reeds are what these dragonflies need in order to enter the last stage of their life cycle. And so these almost adults will climb out to this reed. Again, they look nothing like what we think of as dragonflies. They don't have wings. They don't have a elongated body. But what they do have is the ability to break out of that skin and start to pump up their body. So when they decide that that pressure starts to build up in their exoskeleton, and they break out of that exoskeleton. And in some ways, this reminds me of the movie Alien vs. Predator. It does not look like a pleasant process, but they do burst out of that exoskeleton, and they start to spread and stretch those wings. And as they do that, they actually have to pump blood into their wings in order to extend them and make them stronger and dry them out. And so between the time of crawling up to the reed, bursting out of that exoskeleton, pumping blood into their body to elongate it, it can take them a total of 12 hours. At this point, they're called teneral adults, or basically intermediary adults, and is the most vulnerable time in a dragonfly's lifetime. Now, once they're about ready to start as an adult dragonfly, they start to shake and vibrate and warm up, and then they take off. And at this time, they are treacherous predators of the sky. So dragonflies have remained virtually unchanged for millions of years. They have a perfect body plan. And when these dragonflies are flying, they have a lot of different adaptations that allows them to be dragons of the sky. One of those special adaptations is their eyes. So if we look at this dragonfly, you can look kind of close. This whole thing is a dragonfly's eye. Now this dragonfly's eye is actually made up of 30,000 units. So 30,000 tiny eyes within that one eye. This allows them to actually see in slow motion. And so when they engage these visual units, they are able to slow down time because they capture 200 images per second. whereas we only capture about 60 images per second. So think about the last time that you looked at a flip book. You know those things that come alive when you flip it? Well, when we look at that, it comes alive because we only see 60 images per second. So if it's flipping faster than 60 images per second, it looks like a video, like a movie almost. But it wouldn't fool a dragonfly because they see 200 images per second. So they would actually see each individual page as you're flipping them. And so these eyes allow them to see an almost 360 view around their heads. So you can see an almost 360 view, and they can move this head independently from the rest of their body. So they can keep aware of everything that's going on around them. And then there are their wings. These wings, you can see there's actually 4 of them, not 2 like birds and some other insects. They have 2 pairs of wings, 4 total, and each wing is controlled by a separate muscle. So each wing is very important in being able to maneuver and change direction in mid-air to go after prey. And so as they're flapping their wings, they flap them out of phase, which means they flap these 2 front wings and then these 2 back wings, and then these 2 front wings and then these 2 back wings. But if they all of a sudden see a tasty fly coming by over here, they can engage each one of these wings differently so that they can turn on a dime to catch that fly. And remember again that they see in slow motion. A lot of insects are able to have this adaptation, which means that it's part of the reason why it's so hard to swat a fly. Because again, flies, dragonflies, they see a lot more images per second than we do. And so for our dragonfly, one of the things I find most interesting is this right here. If you can see this like a little bit darker spot right there, and you can see it's on every wing. This is called the pterostoma. This pterostoma is very important for a dragonfly, extremely important, because dragonflies can fly up to 30 miles per hour. That is very fast for an insect. And as a result, that creates a shaking vibration on their wings. And so as they get faster and faster, that shake would start to increase. However, that pterostoma is that tiny little bit is just a tiny bit heavier than the rest of a similar sized piece of their wing, almost like a paperweight. And so when that allows that shake to actually stop, it's like putting a paperweight on a paper that's flying in the air will actually stop the vibrations, and it's only a fraction of a percent heavier that it adds to the wing, but it adds 20%, allows them to go 20% faster when they fly. So if they didn't have that, they wouldn't be able to reach that 30 mile an hour mark. They'd be stuck closer to 20 miles an hour. So that pterostoma is very important for their flight plan. And as you can see, our dragonflies, you might notice this time of the year, they are starting to come out of the water. Dragonflies, for the most part, become adults in late June and July, but we will start to get some now and all the way through August. So start looking about, and you may see a few dragonflies here and there. Check out ponds, and you may see those nymphs that look like something from an alien movie. What's really interesting is a dragonfly's body plan has not changed for 300 million years. In fact, dragonflies date back to the Carboniferous era, when there was a lot more oxygen in the atmosphere. And this oxygen allowed dragonflies to get much bigger than they are today. In fact, dragonflies got as big as 2 feet during the Carboniferous era about 300 million years ago. And this was due to the fact that dragonflies actually breathe through their skin. So they don't breathe through their mouths like we do. They breathe through their skin. And as a result, they're able to take more oxygen in, bring more oxygen to their lungs, and grow to a much bigger size. And so if you have a few moments later today, you can look up something called the Meganura dragonfly. It's the largest dragonfly that ever lived. Again, a wingspan of about 2 feet. And they also ate other insects that were similarly large. But today they would not survive. There is not enough oxygen in our atmosphere at this time, and they would actually faint if they tried to survive in our current atmosphere. So I hope you learned a little bit about dragonflies. There will be a post on Facebook later today. So I hope you take the time to read about that post. And if you are around in the area, or if you happen to be by